disclaimer. But the real reason I'm here. See, I'm reminded of the story of this scientist who decided to do a study on fleas. He took several fleas and he put these fleas in a jar, glass jar that was about 8 inches tall. Immediately he put the lid on top of the jar. Those fleas started hopping up and down. They would jump up and down, just kept jumping. Now as those fleas were jumping, they would jump and they would hit their head on the lid, no big deal, they would fall back down to the bottom. He kept them in this container for about 3 days, jumping up and down, hitting their head on the lid, jumping up and down. But he kept them in this glass container for about 3 days. On the third day, he showed back up and he realized something phenomenal was happening. See, those fleas were still jumping. Now those fleas were now jumping to the top of the container, barely at the rim, but they were no longer hitting their head. So they would jump to the brim of the container, fall back down. They would jump to the brim of the container, and come back down. Then he realized something, the power of that lid. See, as those fleas were jumping over those 3 days and they were hitting their head on the lid, they were being conditioned by that lid to think that they can only go but so far in life, and then they must stop. You're probably saying, Dennard, what does the lid have to do with me? See, metaphorically, if you're listening to the sound of my voice right now, if you can hear me, if you can see me, more importantly, if you can feel me, we've all been hitting our head and being conditioned by lids at one point or another. See, your lid may be different than mine. Some of you all probably had the lid of saying, you know what, I don't know how I'm going to make it to NSLC. Price is a little bit steep. Being conditioned. You're probably saying that maybe I was brought up in a certain situation or a certain background. You know what? That's not conducive to succeeding. You were conditioning yourself. Maybe your household is a little different than your peers. Those were all conditions that has been placed on us. How do I know that? See, when I was your age, by the time I became your age, I've been conditioned. I remember by the age of 6, I was conditioned. That's when my parents got divorced. The reason I put that condition on myself because I was looking at my peers and saying, wow, something is different. They have a mom and dad at home, and now I just have one parent at home. That was me hitting my head on that lid, being conditioned. By the time I got to middle school, I was being conditioned by watching my mom being physically abused over and over and over again. I was being conditioned. In my mind, I was telling myself that I'm no better than my peers. In my mind, I'm telling myself that I'm not worthy because my mom is being abused. I was being conditioned. By the time I got to high school, your age, because of poor choices and decisions, because I was hanging around the wrong crowd, at the age of 16, I found out I was going to be a father. I was being conditioned. My conditioning process was telling me that, you know what? You're not going to make it. My conditioning process was telling me, you know what? You're not smart. My conditioning process was telling me, you know what? You made a bad mistake. Therefore, you are a mistake. I was being conditioned. Just like that flea hitting the head on the lid, not understanding my potential. Guys, you have the potential to do more, have more, be more. One of the first things I challenge you guys to do over the course of these next 10 days is rewrite your story. That's something I had to do. I had to rewrite my story. I challenge each and every one of you listening to the sound of my voice to rewrite your story. The story that you're playing over and over in your head. If you're someone that's saying, you know what, I have a fear of standing in front of people speaking, I challenge you over the next 10 days, you're going to conquer that fear. If you're saying, I have a fear of meeting new people, I challenge you to conquer that fear. If you're saying, I'm not as smart as my peers, I challenge you to look deep down inside to realize your value over the next 10 days. That's a challenge. But I want you guys to change your story. Change the story you're telling yourself. Change the vision that you see about your life. I was always told if you see a man the way he is, he only becomes worse. But if you see a man the way he should be, he becomes what he could be. I want you guys to understand that I see you much better. Change the vision that you have in your head. If you're someone that's saying, I have a vision and I love what I see, I challenge you to make it better. If you're someone in here that's saying, I don't appreciate what I see, I challenge you to make it better. Let me go back to the flea story and understand. I want you to understand where I'm coming from. The scientists wanted to take this study to a whole nother level. So he introduced fleas that were not conditioned by the lid. You can call that flea Dennard. You can call that flea Mr. O. You can call that flea Mr. C. You can call those fleas your TAs. Once he introduced those fleas into that jar, those fleas immediately jumped out. What do you think the other fleas did? They followed. It's our job, guys, over the next 10 days to jump into your lives, to show you a different version of yourselves. I was always told you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. I'll say that again. You can't see the picture when you're in the frame. You guys are the picture. We're looking at you from the outside. And I'm telling you, from standing up here right now, I see brilliance in here. I see greatness in here. But it's my goal. It's the goal of the TAs. It's the goal of this absolute phenomenal doctor that's coming up after me. It's our job to make you see what we see. But you have to trust us. There's 3 things I want to leave you guys with. 3 things that if you can implement these 3 things while you're here, I promise you, and I don't make promises often, I promise you it will make this experience even more enjoyable. See, you